Today, we're looking at a blue-black ink by Jentle Sei Boku. 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 No. Sei Boku. Sei Boku. Sorry. Boku. Boku. No. Sei Boku. Hi, I'm Adam, and I'm an ink guy. There's timestamps down below so that if you want to skip around, you can. But if you got the time, check out the entire video. You can follow me over on Instagram, and don't forget to subscribe. To make sure I have a range of experience with this ink, I do the writing samples. I then put the ink into this Parker Jotter with a medium nib to write for a day and to take my notes for this video. In order to have a standardization in my writing samples, I always use Clairfontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper, although I do use more papers and those will show up later in the video. Now, let's look at the writing sample. I picked this ink up in sample form, so it came in a vial like this. And to keep my writing samples consistent, I use a Jinhao 159 with a Goulet 1.1 stub, a Jinhao X450 with a Goulet medium, and a Jinhao X750 with a Goulet extra fine. Let's take a look at the Clairfontaine. We get no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, some very nice shading throughout it. The extra fine is quite a bit lighter than the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, spots of shading that are going on, very nice, 9 seconds to dry. Medium is the same tone as the extra fine, with no feather spread, halo sheen, same great spots of shading all over it. It's really, it looks a little better here than here, 13 seconds to dry. This scrubby for both show plenty of color variation, and we're getting it in the writing. Tomoe River. No bleeding, normal Tomoe River ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, great, amazing shading here. Looks fantastic. The extra fine is a lot lighter than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, only a couple pepperings of shading throughout, 19 seconds to dry. Medium is the same tone as the extra fine with no feather spread, halo sheen, some nice shading spots, about the same kind of shading, maybe a little bit more than we get with the extra fine. 24 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both in far left to far right, we do see shading and we do get it in the writing. And Rhodia. No bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1, no feather spread, halo sheen, very nice shading, looks so good. The extra fine is a lot lighter than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, very little shading, although there is some. When you look at the left side of the Q or the K, you start seeing some darker parts. It's just not really stand out. 11 seconds to dry. Medium is the same tone as the extra fine with no feather spread, halo sheen, a lot more shading here than we got here. 14 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both show good color variation in the left to right, and we do get it in the writing. I agree with Vita that I've learned a lot by doing multiple chromatographies. The one on the left is done the way it's supposed to be done. I put a line of ink down and immediately put it into water for 10 to 15 seconds. And we see a dark gray line, or a medium toned gray line that's really gotten into the filter paper immediately. Now the blue is pushing its way immediately up from it. But the one on the right that I let dry for 10 minutes, it all stayed right in that line and didn't budge, showing us we're expecting some real resistance for this ink. Resistance tests are done to see how well this ink can be expected to perform on the page, and more importantly, how hard it might be to clean from your pen. I let the smear dry for 3 days before testing it. Looking at the highlighter, I feel perfectly confident using this in a note-taking situation if I want to go back and highlight. Now, water is having almost no effect on the paper, although it's all that I had to use to get this out of my pen. Pen flush is starting to break up that blue a little bit. It's starting to move it away, but it's really not doing a whole lot to it on the paper. Again, water was all that I needed. The 1/3 bleach solution still having almost no effect. It is lightening it up some, but that's about it. I test the viscosity or flow using a tilt test, which I'm going to link the video showing how I do that. For the inks I've tested, I have found an average viscosity of 2.5, with the realm of normal being from 2.1 to 2.9. Jentle Sei Boku has a viscosity of 1.97, making this a wet ink. To find my average dry times, I use my writing samples. Now for the inks I've tested, I found an average dry time of 17 seconds, with the realm of normal being from 13 to 21 seconds. Sailor's Sei Boku has an average dry time of 15 seconds, making it normal. Instead of finding inks that look like Sailor's Sei Boku, I would prefer to find an ink that complements its color on the page. I went for a nice red and chose Noodler's Nikita. The second writing sample is done on yellow Rhodia, Franklin Christoph, and Life paper. Here we're looking at the yellow Rhodia paper. Not to look at any kind of performance change, but more to see, do we get tone changes? And it's very interesting because there's not a whole lot when it comes to the stub. But when it comes to the extra fine and the medium, it definitely takes this blue and makes it more of a turquoise that's leaning green in the writing. Something to be aware of in a professional setting. Franklin Christoph paper. No bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 is no feather spread, halo sheen, and very nice shading. The extra fine is a lot lighter than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, some spots of shading throughout, just a few, and they're kind of nice when they're there. 5 seconds to dry. Medium is a little bit darker than the extra fine, not as dark as the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, a lot more shading than we saw in the extra fine, not as drastic as the stub. 6 seconds to dry. Scrubby for both, show good color variation, and we're getting it in the writing. Last up is Life paper, with no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, great, fantastic shading. It's just amazing there. It looks gorgeous. The extra fine is quite a bit lighter than the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, some very nice peppering of shading throughout with 9 seconds to dry. Medium is a little darker than the extra fine, not as dark as the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, really, truly amazing shading here. It looks so good. 13 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both show us a lot of color variation because we get it in the writing, and that is all that I have for writing samples. So what do I think of Sailor's Sei Boku? It is a little blue leaning for me, although it still maintains its blue blackness, if that's a thing. I enjoyed writing with it. I enjoy blue-black inks. I would just prefer this one to be just a little bit darker towards the black part where it's just a little too blue. It's almost perfect. Almost perfect. Almost. What nib and pen are going to give the best writing experience with this ink? I found a very, very wet stub puts down the perfect tone for me. So perfect it makes everything right that just bothers me on this ink, and I wish it looked that way all the time, but there is some slight tone variation depending on the pen you choose. So for me it's that very, very wet stub that gives me what's nice. If you've made it this far and you've enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up. And if it's your first time here, I'm going to remind you to subscribe. Thanks for watching.